start on the plagues tonight. And depending on your view of the first one, I always count the first plague as the snakes, but I guess they don't get counted. But we'll call them the precursor. How about that? But we've entitled this tonight, Breaking Down Walls. And some of you have been wondering why there's a Lego creation up here. We'll get to that. Don't worry. This is not in any way, shape, or form dealing with our culture today. So don't take all the different colors up here as something weird that I'm going to say today, okay? By the way, God invented the rainbow. I don't know if you knew that, but it's supposed to mean something positive. So all these colors should be a positive thing for you, but it has nothing to do with the rainbow here tonight, okay? There will be a purpose. There's a plan. My crazy things come up in my head. It'll come out to fruition. You'll get it by the end. Hopefully. But breaking down walls, we're not going to Jericho. Don't worry. That's way down the line. We're still in Exodus dealing with some of these plagues. But you know what? It's amazing how many walls that God does have to break down in our lives. And that needs to start in someone who's unsaved. We've created all these walls, these barriers. It's involving our sin. And God's got to break those away for us to get to the end of ourselves so that we'll finally see Him and trust in Him. But you know, sometimes when we're saved individuals, we do the same exact thing. We create all these walls. We create our own kingdom. And God's got to break those down. And we'll see some of that tonight through principles that I think will have great application for your life that you can start applying this evening because, you know, God's Word can still work on Sunday night. I truly believe that. And you don't even have to wait till tomorrow. You can just start tonight and seeing how God can work in you. So as we jump into this and breaking down walls, we're jumping into two brothers. That's 80 and 83. There's some older gentlemen, okay? And they are about God's mission. And they have a plan that God has been given to them, and God's plan is going to work. And even though when there's people that don't like God's plan still comes to fruition. And this is what Moses and Aaron are going to see later on down the road. Now, at this point, they understand that as God's plan has been stated before them and the promises have been given to them, there is a land that they're going to be able to go to as soon as they are freed from Egypt. They understand that, listen, Pharaoh is going to harden his heart. God's going to be active in hardening his heart as well. And that's going to happen multiple times, and it's going to get super frustrating, but God's plan is going to work. So let's jump into this here tonight in Exodus chapter 7. And Carlton, I forgot my remote, so you got it here tonight, all right? I think it's hidden away in that closet back there. So, all right, so in Exodus chapter 7, starting in verse number 8, we're going to start here. And start about this precursor of the snakes, okay? Starting in verse number 8, it says, And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, Show a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, Take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. So he wants proof. He wants proof. Give him proof that there's power behind the actual God, the living God. Here, throw down your rod, and it'll become a snake. Verse number 10, And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. I am so glad that in this moment, Moses and Aaron gave up on all their excuses. Aren't you? Because you actually get to see the power of God in display with a rod. Is there anything special about the rod? I mean, is it like the newest and trendiest rod that's been sold in Walmart all across Midian? Is that where he got it from? Okay. Did he get it from a trendy Shields? You know, it was on sale, you know, good Black Friday sale. No. It was just a stick, okay? It's just something that he used in the midst of his job, and God said, hey, listen, I want you to take that along, and I'm going to use that measly old rod, and I'm going to show you how powerful I am by just laying this thing down, and it's going to become a serpent. Now, what happens in response? Pharaoh wants proof. Proof is shown. Pharaoh is quite prideful. Pharaoh, in verse 11, then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers. Now the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. How did that happen? Whose power is that under? Is it an illusion? Is it a magic trick? Or is this the power of Satan himself? But, I think it's interesting as you move through here. Here's the professionals, the ones that Pharaoh's, hey, this is his team that he's coming, hey, bring them in. Bring in our professionals. We'll show them how it's done. And yet they did exactly as Aaron had done in laying that rod down. And in verse number 12, for they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkeneth not unto them, as the Lord has said. So we see here this precursor of the snakes, where the power of God is on display, and where God can take a stick and make it into a live animal, and yet Pharaoh's team comes in, does the exact same thing, but here's where there's a difference. Here's where there's a difference. The difference is that Pharaoh's guys couldn't come in and get rid of God's snake. God's snake got rid of their snakes, and they couldn't do anything about it. Do you see them jumping in and say, hey, let's go get some more rods. Let's see if we can take him out. No, they're done. That was it. There's nothing there. But yet Pharaoh, even as he's defeated, in essence, he still sees it as, hey, it's just a trick. It's just an enchantment. It's not that big of a deal. My guys can do it. I know, yeah, yours beat ours, but in the same sense, we got the same kind of power. So why would I need to pay attention to you? We are somewhat, in a sense, equal. Okay? And you say, well, where did they get this power again? I've got a little verse here for you, which you're going to see as far as describing the Antichrist as far as what's coming up. In 2 Thessalonians 2:9, it's interesting what this verse says. It says, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. Okay? Satan does have some power, and that power he uses to empower his followers, those that will be in opposition to what God has done. And so this could be, in essence, what Satan is doing here to try to say, hey, I know, God, you want to free your people, but listen, they've got me on their side. I'm going to help them through. I'm going to show you that we can do the same exact tricks. We can show some fun stuff here. We can provide some entertainment for the people. Come on, bring it on. And yet that's not where God stops. The power is on display, but Pharaoh hardens his heart. He doesn't listen up. He doesn't open up his heart to, oh man, this is bigger than us. He just keeps on the level playing field of, we've got this. I'm confident in who we are as Egypt and the power that we've become and the things that we can do. This is the God of the slaves. Why should I pay attention to him? So we get into the actual first plague, and that's when they turn the water into blood. We jump over into verse number 14, and it starts there. It says, and the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuseth to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, and he goeth out unto the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink against he come. And the rod which was turned to a serpent shalt thou take in thine hand, and thou shalt say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldst not hear. Thus saith the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink out of the water of the river. And the Lord spake unto Moses, say unto Aaron, take thy rod and stretch out thine hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams and upon their rivers and upon their ponds and upon all their pools of water, that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so. I love that. Again, no excuses. There's a growth process here. It means that there's hope for us who've been readily going back to the excuses that we want to lay out for what God is telling us to do. Oh, not yet. Not the right timing. I don't have the right tools. There's hope for us. Take this example and see how the power of God is on display when people say yes to God. But it goes on and says, and Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died. And the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Neither did he hearken unto them, as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river. And so what happens in this moment is that God is laying it out. Hey, listen, Moses, Aaron, I want you to strike this water right where the Pharaoh is taking a dip. He's taking a swim. He's going for a pleasure activity, going out in front of all of his people. Here it is. And I want you to go and you want to touch the water because he's hardened his heart. And I want you to be able to touch that water, and those waters are going to turn to blood. And every body of water, if you want to say it like that, that was visible in Egypt became like blood. Can you imagine his face, his expression as soon as that happens? I can't imagine that. Whoa, what's going on here? And as he's backing out of the water. And then he calls over his guys, his professionals. Hey, come on in. Hey, can you do what he did? And guess what? They turned around, and in a limited quantity, they were able to do the exact same thing that Moses and Aaron did in the sense of turning it to blood, but yet what happened here? They didn't turn the water back into regular water. They didn't try to defy what was actually being done. They just did the same thing. And yet 7 days, his professionals could not change the water back. In fact, they had to go and work even harder to go and to dig wells, these shallow wells, that to try to get regular water so they could actually drink something. This created an annoyance in their lifestyle. All the fish, dead, gone. A source of food. Something that they could take care of themselves, and yet it's totally gone. But it's not just that God is proving to Pharaoh, which Pharaoh still does not get. Here's a couple of the false gods that the Egyptians worshipped. These were all relative to the Nile River. There was Happy, also called Apis, the bull god, the god of the Nile. There's Isis, goddess of the Nile. There's Khnum, ram god, guardian of the Nile. There's Osiris, whose bloodstream was the Nile, and there was others. They had all kinds of it. They lifted up this river. It was the essence of their economy that they had lifted to a high point, and God, in one touch of the water with this rod, turned it all into blood. What's God saying? You know those things that you lift up and those things that you hold on to and the things that you glorify? I'm going to strip those away. They are going to be as powerless. There's nothing that you can do against what I have done. You might try to duplicate it and imitate it, but yet you cannot stop what I am doing. You cannot come close to what I am doing. This is the power of God on display. And Pharaoh, he just ran to his room. Have you ever done that in an argument? What do you feel like in that moment? Like you've got something extra to say? Or maybe you have nothing to say. And that's when you just walk away. You've given up. And yet, instead of just giving up, he's turned bitter. He's going more and more bitter. He is hardening and becoming more and more stubborn towards what God wants for his people. So it doesn't stop there. God gets what he wants. He jumps into this next one, into frogs. And you say, "Aw, I love frogs." Not like this. You would not like frogs like this. Some of you have them in your landscaping, and you've got all these frogs. Fully rely on God. You've got it everywhere in your house. You just love these things. Well, guess what? They were everywhere in these people's houses, and they were not so cute. Let's go into verse number 1 of chapter 8. It says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs." You know, the first statement of that, oh, big whoop. This is going to be fun. Let's go get some 22s. Let's go take these things out. It's going to be fun. We're going to smite our borders. I've dealt with so many other greater armies. I mean, remember, if you remember the history that's behind this, it wasn't too long ago that they had actually taken back Egypt from an invading civilization. So if you want to talk about battling, frogs are nothing. They go up against whole armies. This isn't a big deal. And yet he goes on here, says in verse number 3, "And the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. And the frogs shall come up both on thee, and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants. And the Lord spake unto Moses, say unto Aaron, Stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the lands of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt." And here we have it again. One more that the magicians, the professionals from Pharaoh's entourage here comes up and say, "Hey, we can do this," but can you imagine? They can't do the same exact thing. They cannot come and duplicate what God has done. God has taken all of these frogs and put them everywhere. Can you imagine laying in bed at night and rolling over and feeling squish? Can you imagine opening up your oven and there's a frog looking at you? Ribbit. I remember when we lived over in Owanaco and we had these frogs in the creek, or creek, however you want to say it. We had all these frogs that were out there. And I remember how loud that they were. In fact, one night, my mom thought that it was an old man laughing outside. It sounded like an old man. Yes, she's like, what are you saying, Taylor? It was just, the noise was just, it was loud. And it interrupted your sleep. That's just a few frogs, folks. Can you imagine them covering everything? How would you do your laundry? How would you deal with your kids? Don't touch that frog. Don't touch that frog. Don't touch that frog. How many times would you say, no, don't do this? And up till this point, listen, when you put down the rod and it turns into a snake, oh, Pharaoh, send your rods down and try to take care of that snake. Oh, it's not a big deal. He walks away from it. And then he goes up to the river and, it turns into blood. And guess what? He walks away from it. He has his people deal with creating another avenue of getting water. But once you get frogs here, it says that it's going to be everywhere. It's going to affect your servants. It's going to affect you. It's going to be everywhere. He can't pass this off onto someone else. This is affecting Pharaoh himself. He can't run away from it anymore. It's everywhere. To the point, in verse number 8, remember he has his magicians duplicate or try to duplicate what God has done, but yet in verse number 8, what does he say? And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me. Wait a minute, I thought you had your guys for this. Now, I would have been the guy. This is why he didn't have me be Moses, okay? I would have been the guy that asked that. Wait, don't you have guys for this? Don't you have a crew? Don't you have your guys that'll come in and make frogs, right? Go ahead. Have them deal with it. But he says, I want you to entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. Finally, we can go. But it says, and Moses said unto Pharaoh, glory over me, when shall I entreat for thee and for thy servants and for thy people to destroy the frogs from thee and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only? And he said, tomorrow. And he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. Your guys are not even close to the power of God that's on display. No one is like our God. And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses. Did according to the word of the Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. So here it is. He asked, hey, Moses, can you pray for me to God to get rid of this problem? Has an unsaved individual ever come up to you and asked you for prayer? I need some relief. I've got all these problems that are coming at me. Hey, can you relieve this? And guess what? Moses went right to God. And he asked, and you know what? There's a lot of people, when dealing with these plagues, they think, oh, we can explain this away with natural causes. Oh, there was a flood here, and there was an issue here when all the fish were gone, and the frogs had to go after other things, or there was problems in the water, so the frogs had to come out, and there was all these other issues that just led from one thing after another. Listen, in that verse where it says, and the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and bam, things changed. It wasn't for the fact of natural causes. It was God who was moving and displaying his power. But even when God has done all of this, Pharaoh decided to change his mind. Let me ask you a question based off of that. If someone who is not saved comes to you and asks for relief in a situation, do you think God is causing the situation in their life at that point to get them to their knees? In that moment, so do I pray for relief or do I pray for God's work to be done? Have you ever thought of it like that? Oh, my friend's in pain. Well, maybe God's trying to bring him to the end of himself so that it'll actually turn to him. So God, your will be done. And guess what? In this moment, God's will was to stop this plague. And guess what? They're going to move right on to the next one. And this is the last one that we're going to take care of here tonight. And that is the lice or gnats. Okay? And I forgot to give you the god that God actually pushes against in dealing with the frogs. Did you know that the Egyptians worshipped a god called Heket? It was their goddess of birth. It was a goddess with a frog head. How glorious. Wouldn't you want to worship that, folks? Okay, all right. Guess what? God moving against the gods, the false gods of Egypt. Let's go on to point number 4, the lice or the gnats, okay? So when you get into this, it's going to say lice here in the King James, but as you dive deeper into the actual language, it will point you to being gnats. But I think both of those are quite annoying. Would you agree? Okay? They're not something that you like to hang out with, right? Do you agree with that? Okay, all right. So there is some sort of a biting insect that is causing issues in this next section. So going on to verses 16 through 19, it says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all of the land of Egypt." So not only showing the power of God over the water and over the animals, but he's showing the power of God on land and even dealing with insects. Has anybody tried to control insects before? Have you been successful with that? Okay? This is the power of God. And as we move through here in verse number 17, it says, "And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice and manna and in beasts, and all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not." Couldn't do it. This was the end of who they or what they could do. So there were lice upon man and upon beast. Then the magician said unto Pharaoh, get this, this is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. So Egypt's professionals, who what we would believe to have given themselves over to the power of Satan, has finally come to understand that God is bigger and better and more powerful than any power they could try to search out. And you know, this reminds me of how Satanism is growing in America today. Has anybody noticed that? And you know what? Satan's got some power. Satan can do some pretty destructive things. Satan can show himself big in some of these people, and it seems like it's showing up more and more in the rich and the powerful in America today. And some people would step back and be frightened of what's going on. But guess what? Our God is bigger and better and more powerful than anything Satan could put out there. Remember Job, folks? Remember when Satan went before God and God says, hey, where you been? And he didn't say, I'm not telling you. He says, hey, I've been going all over this earth trying to mess things up. And he says, hey, can I mess with Job? He had to ask permission. He didn't get to just do anything that he wanted to. His power is limited. God is the one that is in charge. And so at this point, his minions, his servants are shut up, and they see that the power of God is on display. This must be the finger of God. But did Pharaoh respond? No. This was another false god that God had proved that he was more powerful against. Another god that they had was the god of the desert, and his name was Set. Okay, and this is just another one. And they've got so many gods that are out there with different names that God is proving that he is bigger and more powerful. And you know, it's interesting as God continues to build up his power and reveal that to his people and to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh, he continues to pull away at all of the layers that Pharaoh has put over him and trying to control his kingdom and his life, and yet God is just ripping away at everything that Pharaoh can hold on to, till finally at one point Pharaoh will be able to say nothing but yes to God and finally release the people. It is to come. We're not there yet, but we're seeing as one by one, it's almost like the layers of an onion are being peeled back, okay? It's being pulled off. There is not much that is there that Pharaoh can hold on to, but God is proving himself over and over and over again, which shows us that our God is sovereign. He's in control. But now is where we come to our illustration. You know how Pharaoh has built his kingdom? I was watching Lego Masters with my father-in-law last night, and I got inspired. And let's just imagine that I am more of a Lego master than what has been portrayed here tonight. But there's a point to it, and I only had this afternoon. Pharaoh's built his kingdom, and he thinks he's protected by all the false gods that he's placed around him. Hey, we've got a problem with the river. Hey, we'll just worship somebody over here. We've got a problem with the desert. Hey, we'll worship somebody over here. We're going to try to cover every single base, every single problem, and we'll worship. And let's guess what? Our economy's great. Our army's great. We've got slaves that'll do anything that we want to do, and he just keeps building up. But you know what? No matter how much we try to build, the walls just fall right down as God peels them away to the point where there is nothing left. It's gone. So you got this little guy with his little king hat sitting on his throne. Nothing left. Absolutely nothing left. Except to say, God, You're the answer. Your way's best. I got nothing to hold on to. I got nothing to protect myself with. Everything that I've tried to do, it's gone. To the point where you can only see God. Can you imagine? I've been talking about Peter a lot lately when he went out and walked on the water. Pastor bringing that up. Joe was bringing that up. My father-in-law was bringing it up. It's just been coming up constantly. Can you imagine being out in the water, walking, and you fall? And the waves are crashing around you. What do you got? Nothing. Except Jesus. That's it. Which reminds me, in using this illustration, there's so many things that as humanity, we try to elevate and thinking that, hey, we do not need God. So when we start worshiping the created, and the created most likely is ourselves because we're so full of ourselves, right? I mean, as you look across America today, what are we full of? Me. I'm not getting my way. My space is not safe enough. Back off. I don't want to deal with you. It's about me. And all these things that we try to elevate, guess what we try to do? Education. If we just educate ourselves enough, then we'll fix all of our problems. If we educate all of our children, we'll never see poverty again. Do you think that's the answer? Have we tried that? Has that been pushed before? Has that been elevated? Has that been the idea? Just as long as we educate our children, then we won't have any more problems anymore. Hey, if we have the perfect politics, the perfect constitution, the perfect Bill of Rights, we'll never have problems again, will we? If we put out a Declaration of Independence, we'll never have problems again. Hey, if we just pour money into our school systems, we'll get rid of bullying. We'll get rid of all these other problems. Has anybody seen a solution yet? And you know what's happened? We've built up these walls. And hey, we're America. What do we need God for? It's foolish to walk after that imaginary being. It's a fairy tale. Why would I do something like that? I've got all these things around me. And you know what I've been seeing lately? God's been breaking down all the things that we elevate to the point where there's not much to hold on to. It's nothing else. Except God. God. Except God. So when you're dealing with this type of situation, what's better? Is it better to get mad at God when he's stripped everything away so you could finally see him in a clearer picture? Or is it better to become bitter and harden your heart just like Pharaoh has? I think that's pretty self-explanatory with the passage here tonight. So when we see God and we see that his plan is salvation and he's got the gospel, and guess what? He put himself out there by sending his son to die for us so that we could respond to the truth, so that the truth shall make us free. And he's saying, listen, Taylor, you can't do it by your own good works. You can't do it by anything that you can put out there. It has to be through Jesus alone. In Christ alone, my hope is found. That's it. And so here it is. It's salvation in front of us. Has he broken down all of the things that is absolutely worthless, by the way? Have you been able to see him? Are you willing to respond to the truth, folks? Have you put your faith in God? But you know what? And all of that, I brought up this illustration at the beginning. The world can put all these walls together. Start thinking about ourselves. We got this, and this is mine. Don't mess with me. It's all about me. But you know what? Christians do the exact same thing. Once they trust into Jesus, then they get caught up in their own kingdom. Have you ever heard a kid say, "This is my room, get out. This is my seat, get out of it. I sat here first. I don't want you singing in my room. Shut your mouth." Have you ever heard that before? Now, have you heard adults say that same thing? This is my church, and we're going to worship the way that I think my church should worship. You come into my church, you better act the way that I think that you should act. And you better look at me in the way that I think that you should look at me. Stop looking at me like that, Rick. Right? You say, "Pastor T, you are exaggerating this." I don't think I am. Have you ever gotten annoyed at your kids or your grandkids because they were messing with your phone time? Have you ever yelled at the kids because they were too loud during your show? This is my time. I've been working all day. This is my lazy boy, and I'm going to sit here, and you better bring me my newspaper on my phone. Get what I'm saying? Like, we all of a sudden start building our own kingdom, and we think about all our stuff. Teenagers think about it this way, and then think that hey, listen, I'm going to put off God's stuff till after I get done with my stuff. And let me get out of junior high and high school and make sure that I get an excellent GPA or do all the things that I want to do and all the extracurriculars, because I only get one teenage opportunity in my life to do what I want to do. And then I get to college, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. And then if I have time after that, then I'll talk to Jesus about giving him my Sunday morning for an hour. And you know what I notice? God starts taking down all the stuff that we hold on to. We just had a rep from Faith last Sunday night. And you want to know why he ended up following after God? He was sharing his testimony. He says, "Man, I was in a public high school in Texas. We had several thousand kids in the school. We had scouts coming to watch our entire basketball team. It was set up. And I destroyed my knee. And that whole plan went bye-bye. And his college career turned into 2 basketball games. And I found out that the screws they put in his knee had created craters in his knee to where he couldn't play anymore. Had to go fix it again. Now we can either cry out and say, "God, fix me so I can keep doing my thing," or we can cry out and say, "God, fix me in your way so I stop doing my thing and I start doing your thing." where God's saying, let my people go so they can worship me. How many chains are we putting on ourselves in this world today? And God's saying, let my people go so that they can come and worship me. Are you the Pharaoh in your own life?